War. War never changes.
War. War never changes. A quote from the video game Fallout 4 speaks on so many levels. War is the same never-ending battle with no return. But I want to look at how Hollywood portrays war. How accurate are the intense battle scenes? How has the visual effects and editing changed over time? Do people watch these movies for the action, or to view the realism of war? In the earliest phases of film production, Birth of a Nation depicts war as very gimmicky and humorous. The same is said with that of The General, as Buster Keaton attempts to command cannon fire and his sword breaks by simply swinging it. The use of comedy is most likely a result of the inability to create realism without sound and editing technology. However, once sound was introduced to film, as Singing in the Rain comedically depicted, more films being made that included drama and less humor in an attempt to reflect the hardships of war. With the technology of visual effects, as well as the increased amount of editing being used and developed over the years, we see a mix of unrealistic and realistic war films. Unrealistic, including a ton of explosions like the newest Rambo film, where you can see in the final battle scene, Rambo mows down hordes of enemies while never taking a scratch. On the other hand, we also see the more dramatic movies that focus on the hatred and inhumanity that comes with times of war, like Saving Private Ryan. You can see the emphasis on the shell shock and fear in the young soldiers' minds. This realism makes war seem less like a video game and more like a ticket to death. Both Oliver Stone's Platoon and Mel Gibson's Hacksaw Ridge stood out to me as they were war films that won Academy Awards for Best Editing, yet succeeded as war films for different reasons. I will highlight the difference in editing technology, as well as discuss how the narrative affects the way war is perceived by the viewer. In Hacksaw Ridge, the first battle scene starts strong. Wow. Between the gore and the perfectly timed Foley, this segment captures the complexity of the editing done by John Gilbert. Let's watch that again. You can see the immediate blood spatter on the soldier's face, which couldn't have been a stage prop. You then see and hear the sound of gunfire blasting off the helmet. Let's watch the next few seconds of the scene. You see the large amount of explosions that are purely visual effects as they blow bodies into pieces. Then you see the familiar instance of a scared soldier that we saw in Saving Private Ryan. It is apparent that the technology has progressed immensely, as real explosions and fire can often be replaced with visual effects. For instance, explosions directly interact with live actors through effects, and gunshot wounds are immediately shown on the face. In Platoon, you can see that the explosions are placed as props in areas that don't affect the people on set, as you can see in this scene. The explosions are set in the background, far away enough from actors, something that is considered outdated in current film editing. In the next scene, you can see that gunshot wounds are not shown, they are acted out. As soon as the actor is supposedly shot via sound effect, he collapses. This stunt had to be done to show that he was shot, because of the lack of editing technology to show bullet holes or blood splatter. We all know that in Hacksaw Ridge, bullets would go through his body and possibly cause a flying limb. Now, although Hacksaw Ridge was filled with gore, the main focus was actually to highlight the experience of Desmond Doss becoming the brave soldier that overcame the scrutiny of his peers and left the love of his life to serve his country unarmed. In an article from the Society of Camera Operators magazine, Mark Golnick, the camera operator of Hacksaw Ridge, explains, "Mel wanted the camera to feel like one of the soldiers. He wanted to feel the bravery and passion of the soldiers, and the immediacy of the moment. As a camera operator, your job is to serve the film as best as you can." This shows that Gibson's approach was more directed toward the passion and less the action. John Gilbert explains his approach in this informal interview.
I mean, the first half of the film is about setting the emotional landscape for the second half, I guess. It's if you imagine Private Ryan, what happened to the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, if you'd known those guys and had an emotional investment with those characters, the emotional impact would have been a lot greater. We discussed for a while making the first half of the film go a little faster. because it is quite conventional. And
As you can see, the crew was worried a bit about the public perception, thinking the film to be too slow, yet Gibson stuck to the narrative to create a great story. Gibson expresses that Hacksaw Ridge is a story about love and faith rather than a war film. His decision got me thinking as to why viewers go to see war movies. For me personally, I enjoy to learn history, hence my attraction to war movies that are set before my time, like World War II. However, I wanted to see what others thought, so in a public survey by Hub Pages, people chose to view war films for adventure, the sense of patriotism, and to learn about the history of war. Now, as it seems, movies that contain the combination of these characteristics, like Hacksaw Ridge, are the ones that succeed. On the other hand, there are films like Platoon that still succeed, but are forgotten due to the lack of strong narrative and a compassion for the characters. Their once miraculous editing quickly becomes outdated as new technology arises. In 1986, the New York Times explains Platoon and says, "They get too literary, nor do they explain too much. They are so exceedingly ordinary that they sometimes jump off the screen as if they were the originals for all the cliched types that have accumulated in all earlier war movies." This is much different in the case of Hacksaw Ridge, which takes a totally different spin on the focus on war films. Hacksaw Ridge is another example that present war films, although extremely violent and heavy with effects, sometimes convey a compassionate story. War never changes, which is why a meaningful narrative is necessary nowadays to create a long-term successful film. Visual effects can expose a film to amaze viewers in the box office, but a strong narrative is what makes war films like Hacksaw Ridge and Saving Private Ryan timeless.